Hello everyone, and welcome to this video. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing Megadimension Neptunia VII. The game is by Idea Factory / Compa, and was released in 2016. Well, let's get on with this review. The game's story is set in 3 different parts, with the eventual 3 coming together to form the final chapter and conclude the game's story. The first chapter is set after the events of the previous Neptune game. We have Neptune and her sister Nepgear messing with an old video games console, which ends up sending the pair to a place called Zero Dimension. Once there, they eventually meet Uzume and Umio, who essentially become rebels against the dark forces of Dark Purple and Art 4. Along the adventure, Neptune ends up meeting a different version of herself, who looks more grown up. But because it's Neptune being Neptune, she ends up being just as silly as the Neptune we all know and love, so twice the Neptune for your game. Eventually Neptune and Nepgear return to Planetoon, and this part of the story then finishes. We then come to the second half of the game, called Neptunia G. This is set several days later, where the gang meet up in different locations and have their own separate stories, where they meet Gold Third, who are kinda like a rival group but who end up becoming the gang's newest friends anyway. Each of the main cast now has their own separate story in this chapter. Neptune heads off and meets IF, and the pair end up battling R4 and Affimax and Steam Max, while eventually meeting up with Histoire and meeting B-Sha for the first time. We also have a returning Werichu and Compa, and a reveal of a Dreamcast console, which was a nice added touch. Noir and Uni end up becoming criminals back in Last Station, and end up being separated for a short period of time. During this time Noir meets K-Sha, and the two become super best friends. Eventually Uni rejoins the team, only for K-Sha to go a little bit crazy, and long story short, end up battling on top of the Golden Tower. Blanc ends up meeting C-sha, and the duo become monster hunters together. During this story, Rom and Ram return, and Louis ends up becoming invaded with monsters, which the group and the Hunters Guild then have to take down. Vert's story has her joining the army as a new leader now rules Leanbox. But all the army has been turned into pigs. Yeah, this one gets a bit weird. Anyway, Vert eventually runs into Nepgear, and the two argue with S-Sha at the Golden Tower, and we end up running into an older Neptune who says that she's now joined Affimax. The story then comes to an end once the gang all reunite, and then go off and face Affimax at the hidden base, and when the group get their new next form powers. The final part of the story is called Into Legend, and eventually leads everything together, with all the group coming together to go to Heart Dimension to face off against the game's real main villain, and to save game industry. I'm not going to say too much, because obviously I don't want to spoil the game's story for anyone. The characters for the game consist of the main group being Neptune, Vert, Blanc and Noir. Nepgear and the other sisters are also here along with IF and Compa. And we also have a new CPU Uzume and her friend Umio, who's a take on an old Dreamcast game called Seaman. Look it up. Seriously, look it up. I don't mean Google Seaman on Google search, or you might end up getting something else. But Google Dreamcast and Seaman. Probably best if you add game into that search as well, as now I'm having bad thoughts as what might actually show up. Anyway, the crew are also joined by Nitro Plus, Arthur, God Eater and Netgaia. However, these girls are DLC characters, but they really do add a huge amount to the game's story. I especially loved God Eater myself, and she actually convinced me to purchase God Eater Resurrection on Steam, which I really enjoyed, and if it hadn't been for her, I'm not sure I would have actually ever made a purchase, or known about the game or the anime in general. We then have the Gold Third crew, consisting of C-sha, K-Sha, B-Sha and S-Sha, who are all brilliantly well put together. I fell in love with S-Sha, and she became one of my favourite characters for this game. I really liked how all the girls interacted with each other, and how the jokes worked so well, even with newer characters added to the series. If you're a previous Neptunia player, however, you might be slightly disappointed that previous characters don't show up here at all, such as mages or Plutia or any of the other cast. I didn't like how some of the previous cast members got left out, because I really was hoping that Plutia or P-Sha were going to make some type of appearance in this game, but they just didn't. I can understand why a lot of the previous cast had been left out, however, because the developers did want to focus on the Gold Third crew and introduction into the series. But still, I did feel a little bit left out that Plutia and P-Sha weren't at least mentioned in this game, considering how important they were in Neptunia III. It just seems strange not to add them in, when they're such an important part of the history of the Neptunia games. The monsters the characters face in the game are also from past previous Neptunia games, but we also have a dozen and dozen and dozen of brand new monsters for this game. We get huge giant robots, to dragons, to cute monster squids, to all sorts of new monster and boss creatures now being added to the game. There's a wide variety added, and you won't be getting bored anytime soon. It's a great mix of characters which have had a lot of time and effort put into them, be it from the main characters to the monsters. Clearly, IF and Compa put a lot of love into this game. As with previous Neptunia games, the gameplay here is your standard RPG style combat system, and follows a suit from past previous Neptunia games, but with a few new added features and brand new transformations for the CPUs. The game itself switches from 3D gameplay to 2D gameplay for story mode, coming across as a sort of visual novel RPG type merger. The animations for the 2D sections have had a graphical improvement, and the game's 3D engine character models have also had a graphical improvement, leading to new higher textures and higher resolutions added to them. The stages are also bigger than before, with more monsters on screen and also more enemies on screen on time during either the actual gameplay or the combat system. Combat itself consists of attack, defend, and then command, which is basically where all your special moves are located. You can move about on the battlefield for a limited amount of time until your meter runs out, and you can also swap party members. And once your limit has been raised, you can then do an EX move, which is sort of like your super move, where if you're one of the CPUs, you can transform into Goddess mode. Later on as the game progresses, you can then on your next form mode, which requires you to use 2 bars from the meter. During next form mode, you can use all your standard moves and special moves, but now have access to a super special move, which once done will return your character back to normal form. Stages usually consist of you running about from one area to the next, and each stage usually has a mid-level boss or 2, or in some cases even 3 or 4. Each stage is beautifully well created, and returning stages from previous Neptunia games have all had a much improved makeover, and now look even better than before. You can run and jump around in each stage as much as you like, or just stand there and watch the character's actions while exploring the world around you. Idea Factory have really outdone themselves with this game's environment. The game being split into 3 separate parts and the cast having their own side stories and quests was really well executed. I always love the Neptunia games, but this really stands out as one of the best in the series, because the world really has been handled really well in this release. The way the game starts you off with Uzume in her ruined world, and how the 4 of you basically become like the Rebel Alliance, battling against R4 and Dark Purple, was really well done. Basically puts you right in the thick of it at the very start of the game with a type of serious tone, but then uplifts it with Neptune just being her usual self. But by then adding to it, by adding all the feels that the game just throws at you at random. The main cast all have strong side stories, with each one of them getting to know the new Gold Third members and learning more about the story. None of the cast have a weaker story in favour of someone else having a better one, which is something I would expect from a company like Capcom or Square Enix to pull. It's clear that IF and Compa really cared about the characters' stories for this game, and focused on making it a strong story, with every emotion that you could throw at it. I loved exploring this world which I had travelled in previously with past Neptunia games, only to find it's now bigger and better, with more to explore and more to find. The new stages are put together and mix perfectly well with their new environments. In Zero Dimension, I really did feel like the place was a ruined hellhole, with only a handful of decent people or animals left that Uzume was trying to protect. I kept wondering what had happened to their world, and I wanted to find out more. The same with later chapters, and basically throughout the whole game really. Idea Factory and Compa did a very good job with this game's environment, because right from the very beginning of this game, it captures your attention, and right to the very end, it still does that. You don't get bored midway through, like what you do with some other role-playing games. The game's graphics have had a dramatic boost since this was originally a PS4 title. However, it being PC, the graphics will always look better, especially if you have a good GPU. I ran this myself on my GTX 970 and just couldn't get over how pretty the game's graphics actually were. Even in the bleakest of dungeons, once battle happens, your eyes are treated to the glory of the game's combat system. You got all these great special moves and lots of flashing lights and explosions and laser beams and pretty much everything else. The game renders lots of enemies on screen in-game and also in combat, and in both modes everything is displayed very well. The detail on the characters, such as Arthur's tassels on her outfit moving in the wind, leaves falling from the trees, and characters' hair blowing in front of their faces, and all of the small various details in the game really add to how much effort was put into this game's graphics. I didn't run into any problems while playing the game and found that the game ran smoothly throughout. I know I was running this on a high-end card, and that the Steam store page says that the minimum recommendation is a GTX 650 as a bare minimum. I did also test this game on my GTX 670 on my upstairs PC for footage for this review, and only found minor slight delays in certain areas. Things such as when I was transforming to the next form mode, the game would roughly hold for about a second or maybe two before continuing, but I never experienced this with my GTX 970. I'm not sure if anything lower than a GTX 650 would run the game, but realistically, if you do want the best out of this game, you should be playing it on a decent card to get the most out of the game's graphics. Now it's time to ask yourself, should I buy Neptunia VII? Now, here's the thing. Idea Factory and Compa have released Neptunia VIIR, which is meant to be a remake of this game. However, it isn't. VIIR is a compressed version of this game, with a new added VR section added to it, and really it doesn't make a lot of sense. With this game, you get the whole package, yet with VIIR, you get a compressed version of this game with sections missing and characters removed completely from the game. In VIIR, you don't get characters like God Eater or the multiple endings, as they're just gone, and you only get the one ending. I can understand in a sense, because VIIR is meant to be the cast sort of remembering the past events of 7, but to completely remove certain characters and events from the game just seems rather stupid. Take this for example, The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies. Myself and my wife watched this in the cinema upon day one of release, and when we watched it we were both like, what the shit? What happened to the Arkenstone then? Is it just being ignored? No funeral or anything for Thorin? And then much later on when the extended DVD came out, it had all these scenes put back into the film, because they'd been cut stupidly because it was a theatrical release. Now, if you have something that's 100%, you then take away 20 to 30% of it, but then add 5 to 10% of new material and claim that you get more added content, yeah, that's not really giving me added content, that's just giving me less while lying to me. It makes me wonder why the hell anyone would want a product like VIIR in the first place when it's got less content than what it's actually based off. Even with VIIR being out, I would advise everyone to ignore it and leave it alone, and instead buy this game, as it's the whole actual game, with everything added to it. You get all the goals, you get all the story, and you get all the ending, and that's just missing in VIIR. Neptunia VII became one of my most favourite games of all time, and was the one single thing that was making me happy, while I was currently at my crappy job that I was doing at that point in my life. I've mentioned before in past videos how I was stuck doing a job I absolutely hated, and when Neptunia VII first came up on the pre-order, I got excited, as the Neptunia series always brings a smile to my face. It's very rare that I play a Neptunia game and I feel disappointed, even if it's something really short like Neptunia vs Sega Hard Girls. It was short, but I still enjoyed it. I originally purchased the deluxe edition of Neptunia on pre-order when it first showed up, and this came to something like $59.99, and that had all the DLC characters and everything else thrown in. At first the price really put me off, because that's a lot of money to some people, and it's a lot of money to some other people. Yet here's the thing, usually I always try and get games cheap, and that's not just me being tight-fisted, it's because I know with certain games I can mod them to Kingdom Come, such as Skyrim, Fallout or Dead or Alive 5. I can mod them and I can always play them. But with games like this, I usually just do one playthrough, unless it's something that requires me to do it 2 or 3 times to see everything the game has to offer. The only 3 games I've ever replayed constantly from beginning to end were Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1, Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. Yet with this game, I just didn't care about the price tag. I saw it was a Neptune game, I saw it was the biggest adventure yet, I saw everything looked better, I saw like characters I cared about looked better, I saw it had an epic story to tell, and I just paid for it straight up. And you know what happened? I was instantly happy within 3 minutes into the actual game. Gone were all my shitty feelings that work had put on me, and gone was my sadness or foul mood swings, because I was playing a Neptunia game. That's the greatness of the Neptunia series, which I don't think a lot of other game series can pull off. It's funny, with lots of in-game jokes thrown in, it's always got a good cast of characters, and characters who meld and work together perfectly. It's got the ability to make you laugh and smile, but then fill you up with tears at the same time. It can be funny and then serious, while all the while keeping its charm. You just don't get that with many other games. It is an obvious answer, but yes, you should buy Neptunia 7 and all the DLC. If you wait for it to come on sale, then definitely make the purchase for it. But if you can't wait and want it now, then even at today's asking price of $56.56 for the complete package with everything thrown in, it's still definitely worth it. If I didn't have the game today and saw that the price tag was still there at $56.56, I still wouldn't care, and I would just buy it again, because I know it's a Neptunia game, and I know it's going to make me happy. It's a great experience with a great cast of characters, loads of great jokes for gamers, great story, good graphics. The only fault I can actually give this game is I wish it was longer. I personally got around 90 hours out of the game, but that was with me doing all the dungeons and all the side quests. I just wish that it was longer, because out of all great things, they eventually do come to an end. And when I completed this game, I was just sad that there was no more to play of it. Because now, it just looks like I'm left waiting for the latest Neptune game. Well, that's it for this review guys. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.